Good evening and welcome to Sugar, Silk and Stretch. I don't have sugar. Well, I do have sugar, sorry. I don't have silk. I don't have stretch. But my name's Ben Doughty. And I'm delighted to be joined this evening for an impromptu Monday night show by world-class multi-combat athlete, human performance expert as well, Gary. I should have consulted you precisely on your kind of billing before we started, but what the heck? I mean, you're here because you're a boffin on certain things and you've studied on certain things, but perhaps you could frame it for the viewers before we kick off with tonight's specific agenda.
Yeah, sure. A quick bit on me. I'm Gary Turner. My sports career picked up 13 world titles across kickboxing, Thai boxing, sports jiu-jitsu. I was elite level at 5 more. I was an original MMA fighter, had over 1,000 competitive bouts. So I kind of know what it's like to actually step inside a ring, match, cage, fight environment. I'm also just completing a PhD, which is a policy analysis in respect to traumatic brain injury in combat sport athletes. But on the back of that, I've also carried out other research into transgender athletes. The research I specifically did was the experiences of a registered female at birth, transgender men in contact sports, and it was their experiences. And I did it through semi-structured interviews. I interviewed 17 trans men, so they were assigned female at birth and now live as men in combat sports. So in contact sports, many were in combat sports, and one indeed a combat sport world champion, which kind of goes against the media side. That was presented to Sport England at Symposium in 2019. Since then, I've continued to follow the transgender literature. I've got another paper in with some colleagues at the moment for a decision whether it's going to be actually published or not. Again, on transgender participation in sport. And as a result of that, I've kind of had my eyes opened to things I didn't know I needed to know. And that include things about sex and gender. And that leads us nicely onto what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah.
Of course, the Imam Khalif, if I've pronounced her name correctly.
I think it's Iman. It might be Halif. I think the K might be silent. But
Right.
the reason I've asked you to come on and talk about it, because this gender row came and went in the summer during the Olympics, but it reared its head again last week. And this is the crux of it for me. A French journalist reported that he'd had access or sight of leaked medical records and in cahoots with it with two endocrinologists whose names were used, or one of them, a prominent man, his name was used, supposedly concluded from the leaked medical records that Imam Khalif has an XY karyotype and actually has testicles. Now, the thing was, Gary, as you know, so much today is about worldviews and belief systems, and there are people who want to believe this narrative that the whole world has gone mad and they're all woke and it's all this loony left liberal militia, and they want to turn everything upside down, especially gender, and they want to destroy the foundations of democracy and good family life and mum and apple pie or anything else, right? So loads of people jumped on it, including people like Piers Morgan, by the way, who said, I
Yeah.
told you it was you got Piers Morgan saying it was confirmed. It was confirmed yesterday. He's a man, which it was not confirmed, by the way. And then obviously you get the pub type saying, I told you in the first place. It's obviously a man, dirty bully cunt. Forgive me for using that word on the podcast, but I think I'm allowed to because it's not that big yet. So let's deal with this initially, or first and foremost at the outset, that was not confirmed in any credible sense whatsoever, I don't believe.
I haven't found any actual evidence of any of her medical, or any of the comments about her medical side. We can possibly assume, but it's an assumption, not a fact, that she has an XY karyotype. However, there are many XY females It doesn't necessarily mean just because you've got a Y chromosome,
So is
you're a
that the first
man.
misconception that needs banishing? Because a lot of people have said, "Listen, if you're XY, you're a man." End of. I mean, the more basic argument, of course, is if you've got a vagina, then you're a woman, and if you have a penis, you're a man. But it's not true. You're telling me that you can be just because you're XY, it doesn't make you a man
That's
necessarily.
right. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why XY testing or testing for the Y chromosome was dropped from the International Olympic Committee and their sex testing. There's too many exceptions. Sports persons are particularly affected by it. And I think I pulled out a bit of research with it. Here we go. Relatively common among top class athletes, occurring at least 1 in 421 female athletes.
What,
That
XY?
means that 13
Really?
of the athletes, of the 5,250 female athletes at the Paris Olympics, 13 of them would have carried the Y chromosome.
Okay, and that's just a relative abnormality or a statistical rarity since birth that they.
You got it, yeah. I mean, it's far more rare in the general population, but elite
But
athletes,
more common in
sport
athletes,
rewards
yeah.
genetic freaks. I know I am one, and as a result of that, unfortunately, there's more females with a Y chromosome in elite sport than walk around the general population. The ratio changes. I think it's 1 in 20,000 in the general population. There's 1 in 421 with female athletes. Now, these are generally 46 XY differences in sexual development, people. So 46XY DSDs, as they're known. It's quite possible, even with, as has been publicised this week, the belief that Khalif, the belief
Yeah,
that
I like that.
is sorry, it made me chuckle, laughing at my own jokes. It is 5-alpha reductase deficient. Even that, you can still have a full female phenotype, which means that even though your chromosome has a Y element to it, which would normally make you male, you can still appear, for all intents and purposes, physically as a female.
So, okay, there's so much to discuss, which is very interesting, and so much I don't know. But I have been, from doing my little bits of research and talking to a couple of people in Algerian boxing, and I just talking, Gary, about people who messaged me when the controversy erupted. I'm easy to find as a man discussing boxing and hosting boxing chats. So a few people messaged me in their broken English saying, please, you must stop all this bullying, or try to help us stop all this bullying. She is woman. She has always been woman. Now, that hardly, constitutes cast iron evidence, but from me looking into it and talking to a few people on the boxing scene, and even talking to some English amateur doyens who remember certain events, like her being expelled from the World Championships the previous year in 2023 by the IBA. What I have been persuaded to believe by my natural research and interaction with people is that Iman Khalif was born female, as far as everybody was concerned, including herself, raised female, always competed within the female ranks of amateur boxing, and she was competitive without being absurdly dominant, without having a ludicrous advantage. The thing that muddied the waters, or certainly helped to sensationalize the story early doors in the Olympics, was the Italian girl who crumbled after 46 seconds. She didn't crumble, actually. She just quit, and she walked away and said, never been hit that hard. Now, I believe, looking at that girl, Angela Carini's record, she was a tough girl who'd done well in elite competition. I don't know why, Gary, but I honestly think she bailed. I think that was a stunt. I'm not sure what she had to gain from it, but I just don't believe that was her best effort, because she was the only opponent that of Khalif's that failed to go the distance in that Olympic campaign. Amy Broadhurst, who'd beaten her previously, said she's good, but she's not. I don't think, she said, I don't believe she's a biological male, and she's not that strong. And quite honestly, she said she's okay, but she's not Godzilla. Do you know what I mean? And that to me rang very true from an honest fighter's opinion who's actually shared the ring with us. So, regardless of, by the way, does DSD mean development of sex disorder?
Say again?
Does DSD stand for development of sex disorder?
Differences in sexual development.
Okay, so regardless of the genetic or but I'm trying to think of what the word would be, the backstory for Khalif. I believe we're talking about someone born female to parents who thought they had a girl, certainly always believed she was female, and has always lived female and competed as female. Is that fair to say? We're not talking about transgender, are we? We're not talking about a former man who used to be called Barry Smith or whatever. Sorry, I didn't mean to mention Barry Smith, the highly successful coach and member of Team Anthony Joshua and others. It's just the most ordinary name I could think of. In Algeria, you wouldn't be called that anyway. But you know what I mean? We're not talking about a former man, and here's pictures of him at college on the fucking football team and all the rest of it, and then suddenly it becomes the female Olympic champion. That's not the case, is it?
No. Here, so it was Mark Adams in a statement from the IOC at a press meet. He said she was born female, has lived female, and the scientific consensus is that she is female. That tells me that the IOC have looked at it. With the letters and information from the IBA, I believe they possibly looked a little bit deeper into Khalif and her gender stroke sex. Gender different to being sex. Gender is your internal and externally directed identity. It's a set of socio-cultural constructs as to what constitutes a man or a woman, whereas sex, of course, apart from legal sex, which has different definitions, sex generally represents your biology. However,
sex is the base term. Sex is the base term, and gender is the kind of trappings of accepted norms almost on top of that.
That's right. I'll go with that. But sex turns out to be incredibly complicated. I've been amazed as I've been led to learn more, and I've been going through. And obviously, I've got scholarly literature access, so I've been going down a little deep dive and learning more. And I didn't realise that sex itself has no agreed definition. It can vary. 1 in 4,500 live births actually has genitalia which you can't identify as either female or male, and decisions have to be made. There's no definition of male or female that sits without an exception. So even defining what sex is hard, let alone then applying it, testing people, and actually working out what sex they are. For qualification, the IBA, in their statement that they released during the Olympics, said that their amendments were: the definition of men, male, boy is an individual with chromosome XY. Definition of women, female, and girl is an individual with chromosome XX. So straight away, what they've done there is they've decided that if you're XY, boom, you're a male, and if you're XX, you're a female. But that misses, 1 in 421 elite level athletes.
So that's interesting as well, and it's worth clarifying that because some people said that the IBA was simply being disingenuous, and it was a kind of it was a conspiracy from the IBA to discredit this Algerian athlete, because it's interesting to note she wasn't barred from the 2023 World Championships at the outset. She progressed, I believe, to the final. She definitely had 3 bouts in that tournament, which she won, and she was about to come up against, I think, a Russian in the final. It was that kind of potentially obvious.
That's what's been reported.
So some people said they just made it up effectively to scupper her chances of winning the World Championships. But what you're suggesting is they may well have with integrity found her to be XY, but made what might be the wrong conclusion on the basis of that.
I mean, in that case, of course, there was the IBA are definitely they definitely change their story every time they speak. Originally, there was a test carried out.
Why would they wait until the final, by the way, as well? Why would could that not have been established at the outset of the tournament before she actually boxed?
So the way the IBA explain it is they did a previous test, which was inconclusive.
Right.
So then they needed to do a second test to qualify that. They couldn't do that until a neutral country was hosting something, and they were actually performing. So they were tested at the World Championships. And I could understand it might take a few days or a week for the results to come back. So the timing, I wouldn't object to at all. That's very feasible. But the story keeps changing. Someone said they tested testosterone, but even if they tested testosterone, normal naturally produced testosterone, even with those with DSDs, there is no real evidence to show it has a performance enhancement over and above what normal XX females have.
Achieve, yeah.
So that would be a separate one. And then they kept on changing the story. The president, I believe, or the chairman of the IBA announced that it was that Khalif had a Y chromosome, therefore failed the testing on the Y chromosome because the Y chromosome says she's a man. To a journalist, to a Russian journalist, and that's when it started to take off a little bit. People have said that Khalif didn't appeal it, but she did. The initial appeal to the Court of Arbitration in Sport was funded by the IBA as part of the process. But when the money ran out and the money hit that cut-off point, then she didn't have the money to pursue it further. So she did dispute it. It was disputed at the time.
And that's important too, because that was part of the narrative for those who believe the IBA and thought she shouldn't be there. They said, well, she didn't have anything to say about it and they didn't contest it. That's what.
Yeah.
Because there was a Chinese girl too, wasn't there? There was a Chinese girl who was
Taiwanese,
also
I think, was she?
Was she Taiwanese? Sure, okay. Yes, I can't remember her name right now, but she was also barred along with Khalif from the 2023 World Championships. Presumably, she'd already boxed as well. I'm guessing because of the stage at which.
Yeah, they're all boxed previously. So you've got two females, believing they're females, fighting females, never any problem until just before the 2023 World Championships.
Yeah. And let's also make the point to anybody who doesn't already know that the IBA was stripped of their right to preside over boxing in the 2024 Olympics because of governance failures and because of corruption and inconsistencies, and basically were not seen as fit for purpose. So there's also, as well as the suggestion that there was political grist behind the decision to ban or throw Khalif out of the World Championships, there was also possibly a motive to discredit the Olympics, or at least discredit the boxing, principally the female boxing event in the 2024 Olympics. Because people do that, don't they? Particularly when they.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely motive for nefarious action by the IBA, but I'm not saying that took place. All I can say took place for the IBA is that they changed their story all the way through the process, and I don't know what to believe from the IBA as a result. That's my personal opinion on it. When they're saying one thing, it's testosterone, and then they're saying testosterone wasn't tested for. Either it was or it wasn't. It's they when they change a story so often, it's not something that I would trust. And then, of course, we've got the reports that came out last week from the medical centre.
Yeah.
But that's taken on a life of its own as well. It was the Conversation, a Paris-based, French-based newspaper that released it. But one of the journalists said that they had access to the medical reports.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, even when you read the journalistic version of it, it still doesn't confirm that Khalif is a man.
No. There was the two suggestions, and I suppose bombshells, were XY karyotype and testicles. And somebody was commenting on one of my threads saying what it is testicles, or miniature testicles are formed where there should be a uterus. Have you heard that? You probably know about that phenomenon, right?
Yeah.
Talk to us about how that occurs and whether you think it's the case at all with Khalif or not.
Yeah, so what they've done, they've carried out, in the article, they put a couple of extracts on, which weren't linked to anybody. So they could literally be about anything. I don't consider them definitive proof of anything. What they've suggested is 5-alpha reductase deficiency, which basically means you've got someone with and we need a medical expert on the terms. I'm very much a layman when it comes to this. Okay, I've got some heads up on it, but I'm still a layman on it. But basically, you've got the XY chromosomes, and the person should develop as a male all the way through. However, with the 5-alpha reductase, it doesn't quite work that way. The child is born with quite commonly female external genitalia, and internally they can have these internal testes. For example, Caster Semenya, the 800-meter runner, she was found to have internal testes, despite presenting externally with a female phenotype, a female body.
Yes.
And this could be the case, of course, with Khalif. I'm not saying it is because I literally don't know, but it could be the case with her that she has these internal testes. She's the conversation said that they had that she had 5 alpha reductase deficiency. So it could well be that she has these internal testes. Sometimes people with this also then become more masculine at puberty.
Yes.
And not everyone remains as a female. But these people are registered normally female at birth and go through life as a female, unless at puberty the masculine changes take place.
If it's very radical to the point where it's almost ridiculous,
and then they change over.
Then we've got this wrong.
The end result of this is they're born female. They're registered as female.
So, what is your opinion? Like, for instance, the runner that you mentioned, Kassa, and also if it were the case for Khalif, which we're not saying it is, does that? What's your opinion on whether that actually represents any kind of athletic advantage over other women in a physical sport?
Well, again, I called up some articles with it. So this is on the 46XY DSD female athletes, the elite athletes. To quote from Ferguson Smith 2014, however, there is no evidence that these athletes possess any physical attribute relevant to athletic performance that is neither attainable nor present in 46XX women. In other words, what that's saying is there's no evidence of any advantage that they've got over what other females can have.
And you know, just relying on the evidence, plain evidence of one's eyes. I imagine you watched Khalif box in the Olympics.
I didn't see all their fights. I saw a couple, yeah.
Same thing. So, and I didn't see anybody with a huge strength advantage or power advantage. I just saw a girl that was a good boxer. You know, I mean, she's certain physical advantage. She's tall. She's got a long reach, etc., which my friend Michael Elijah thinks is actually not an advantage anyway, or certainly.
I don't think it's an advantage.
Yeah,
I thought people like Alexander Ustinov. I go a stack of inches away. I'm only 6 foot. He's what, 6'8", 6'9". And you know, it's if you get inside a fighter with the long limbs, then they've got the problem because
exactly. So exactly. So I didn't see this brute force phenomenon when I watched Khalif's Olympic bouts. The first one against the Italian girl Carina was a farce, as I've already detailed. So really, that would be, I would be persuaded to believe that regardless of any internal workings, that there isn't a physical advantage. So I suppose at that point it comes down to a prejudice or various prejudices, because the fact is she does look kind of masculine. I mean, she's done the glammed up Vogue shoots where she's been very made look very feminine, and she's done the kind of androgynous shoots with the suits on and everything, and she has a certain kind of swagger of a walk that probably looks more male than it does the classic female in stilettos kind of catwalk, you know. But those are all. Michael Elijah summed it up pretty well when he said during the Olympic rail, when he said, listen, at the end of the day, we've all seen more masculine-looking women and more feminine-looking men. So that is neither here nor there, is it?
Human variation, normal human variation. Her height, she's tall for a lady. She's above average, but well within the normal ranges of females, particularly if you're Dutch. So that's the height, and those with 5-alpha reductase deficiency quite often are taller than other ladies. So that could actually be evidence that she is 5 alpha reductase, and that is her difference in sexual development.
How do we solve this, Gary? Because Halif is looking at turning professional. That's going to put things on a spotlight on another level, because the
Yeah, yeah,
professional game is an entertainment industry, as you know, and it's, if she thought there was a lot of attention in the amateurs, there'll be a whole lot more attention if she enters the paid ranks with presumably with a major promoter. So inevitably, this story is not going to go away, and the voices on either side are not going to go away. So how is this resolved in simple terms?
there is no simple terms. Sport has got its rich history from 1966 through to 2000 of sex testing in sport. And it failed because there's no clear definition of what actually is a male and what is a female that comes without exceptions. And as I've already said, elite athletes tend to have more differences in sexual development than the average person.
Presumably because they're pushed towards sport quite often. Certainly, where the females are concerned, if you are, you know, unusually athletic or strong or fast or whatever, then people might push you towards sports anyway, right?
Yeah. Now, let's be quite honest about this. On physical metrics, overall, males within sport, which are generally male dominated anyway, or male designed anyway to sort of promote the masculine ideal, so they suit men rather than women anyway. But men do have physical advantages over female. It's commonly reported as between 10 and 30% advantage over a female with their physicality. I dispute that because in some instances, buoyancy, flexibility, ultra endurance, balance, and such like, females actually have physical advantages on that. So it's a broader scale of that. But females will generally be less able than men to take hits and things like that. However, the performance difference between male and female sports is not always just down, or rarely just down, to physicality. There's this huge socio-cultural and economic disadvantage that female athletes have. Our Lionesses spoke out about this before the last Rugby World Cup, the last Football World Cup.
Yeah.
Females are still disadvantaged in sport on a social, cultural, and indeed economic level. And some of the gender criticals go, "Oh, you're just saying we should try harder." All right, no. But if you think, even on this whole Halif affair that's carrying on at the moment, people are saying that it's all showing women as being a lesser sports person than Halif, just because it's assumed that she's a man, in their opinion. Even that is denigrating, I believe, to women and holding them back.
I understand. I understand your thrust there, but I would say that suppose the people who are utterly convinced that this is a disingenuous, horrible, freakish bully who entered this particular life path so he could beat up women. If you'd have put Iman Khalif in the male welterweight category, I imagine she would have got battered, right?
I believe so.
Yes, glad you
You
said
know,
that, because not for any other reason than things would get really complicated if you hadn't have said yes to that. I don't know where the hell what we could conclude after that. So
yeah.
I think women don't fight men for a reason. Obviously, you would get situations sometimes when I remember, okay, Carl Frampton talking about sparring with Katie Taylor, and what he was saying, whether he was being particularly flattering to her and trying to hype her up a little bit or not, I don't know. But whether he was being, magnanimous and overly generous. But he said, boxing wise, he was almost saying she was better than him, and he found her really hard to handle. So he had to use his maleness to try and keep her in check and push her around a bit, and just keep get hold of her a little bit, just to balance the fact that he felt she was quicker and sharper and maybe even a bit cleverer in certain ways. I remember Frampton saying he had to stamp his strength on her a little bit just to
Yeah,
contain her.
yeah.
So generally, we've never really seen. I don't think we've ever seen a cross discipline, across gender fight, certainly not in the form of boxing that I recall. You know what? There has been. I think Lucia Riker knocked out a man once. I think he was a Thai boxer,
No, she lost
but
to the
nothing high
man. I think
profile. Oh,
she. I
sorry,
think
you're
Lucia
right.
lost.
She lost to the man because she
Mm.
said, "I really respect him for fighting me." Because God knows, imagine if he'd lost, what would that do to his masculinity and his reputation and everything
Yeah,
else?
again, the
So we
social
know.
cultural side.
Yes, so we know men don't fight women in boxing or in other combat sports for a reason, and it is because men are stronger and have certain advantages in
Not
that particular.
not so much stronger. I mean, one of the things that and people really kick back on this, but unfortunately, the data is the data. Women can actually produce the same punch force at impact as men can. They have the capability of producing the same punch force at impact as men.
That's
Um,
been tested, has it?
uh,
That's been proven in scientific tests.
it's being tested at the moment. So if we study the works of people like Lunetsky into the kinematics of punching, which carries everything from ground force reaction all the way through to the impact with the knuckles, it shows clearly that. Oh, and again, we've got research like Pierce 2014. He did lots of tests with instrumented gloves during competitive boxing matches, not even sparring, but competitive matches. And he showed that all weights could generally punch with the same punch force at impact. However, heavyweights were more likely to be knocked out, which
Yeah,
raises an interesting thing. So men and women generally, another bit of research that kicks in. If you've got bench press, elite male boxers will generally bench press more than females. However, that just very first initial start, the only thing that actually translates through to a boxing punch, men and women are the same as. And they're forgetting it's more about kinetic flow and technique and how to generate effective mass, how much weight, how many molecules we can get behind a punch that generates it. So males and females can produce the same punch force at impact. Other studies will show quite, and again, research up in Aberdeen is starting to be carried out, demonstrating that as well in their
what
research.
while they're at it, without wishing to segue, I'm sure you've picked up on this ongoing argument that not just me, but most of the boxing establishment world have had with Michael Olajide, because he believes that you're more likely, you can generate more force with bigger gloves, 16 ounces. Because obviously everybody spars in big gloves and fights in small gloves because they believe that the small gloves are more damaging and you'll punch harder with them and you'll punch with more force, and that there's a relative nursery safety aspect to the bigger gloves. And I know I
Yeah,
think you've suggested before people should spar without headgear in tens or even eights.
it's one of the
So
things I used to do was. Haven't got one here, but still got it. Do I've got it? I think it's burst. Yeah, it's burst. So what I had in here was giving my lectures online to the university students. That was a water balloon.
yeah,
And what
okay,
I'd do, I'd hit, imagine this has got hair, skin, scalp around it. Then you've got the skull,
that's the
which
brain,
is a
right? Yeah,
protective shell. Inside that, you've got the meninges, you've got a series of tissues, the
yeah,
dura layers. Inside that, you've got the brain, which has got like if you hold it in your hand, it will generally slip through your fingers. If you see someone holding a whole brain, secured brain, it's jelly-like. So a water balloon with a teaspoon of water in there for cerebrospinal fluid kind of represents what a brain's like inside a head. And everyone can do this: get a jar, stick a water balloon in it with a tablespoon of water, and then hit the outside. Even with the head not moving, you see the vibration. You
yeah,
get linear as you go left and right, so the brain will bounce on one side, get impact compression on one side, but stretch on this side as it bounces back and forth, the linear movement. And we get rotational movement, all of which is damaging to the brain and it's serving vascularity. Now, one of the things that I do in my lectures is I pull up. Here you go. I used to have the Huskies. We've still got some more
yeah,
Huskies going up. There's always room for
wicked.
Huskies. So I put the Huskies pillow in front. As I hit it, you actually see that it moves the same, if not more, than if I hit it without it. Obviously, there's no water balloon left because it blew up.
So the padding, so that takes away from the extra padding argument on a glove,
Yeah,
because
well, it's a difference between. So if you're wearing smaller gloves, no gloves, you're more likely to get acute injuries to the soft
yeah,
tissue of the face, and also more likely to get skull fractures. if you have gloves, protection, the more of it, headgear, the more of it, it increases contact time and actually allows more force to reach the brain. So when you're wearing headguard, you're protecting yourself against superficial injuries that you can see, but
Yeah.
actually increasing the injuries that you can't.
But I mean, certainly that might be worse for brain trauma and long term damage. But which one do you believe is more likely to result in a knockout? If it's John Scully, who argues against the silk on this, his go-to scenario, hypothetical, is always you're going to spar with Julian Jackson. Do you want him to wear 8 ounce or 16 ounces or even 20 ounces? And he says, I 1000% assure you that any fighter is going to pick the 16 ounces. He's not going to get in there with, a legendary all-time great puncher like Julian Jackson with the small gloves on. So which one do you think is more likely? I mean, cuts and bruises, I get it, and the idea of possibly conducting more brain damage at the other end, I get it. But which one's more likely to knock you out on
Bigger
average?
gloves.
Bigger gloves. So you're in complete agreement with the silk in actual fact.
Yeah,
He will love that. He will love you for that.
And it's part of the reasons why heavier weights tend to get knocked out more by the same shots as lighter weights hit. Lighter weights, you get hit and you get the displacement. That dissipates energy and force. With the heavyweights, you get the bracing effect. Rather than getting hit, that's the way around it, getting hit and then dissipating the energy, heavyweights, as you get hit, there's the bracing effect of the extra weight. What that actually does, it allows more mass, more of the punch to go in and more of the mass of the resistance, and the brain is what takes the strain in the middle. All the forces gets transferred to the brain.
I always wonder if
Bracing
anyone's
effect for the
done a
heavyweights.
statistical, because that is one of the deeply entrenched boxing beliefs. When two heavyweights are in there, someone can always get knocked out, or well, you never know. It's heavyweight boxing is one of those cliches when they talk about unexpected turns of events and KOs and stuff. But has anybody conducted any statistical research, I wonder, to prove that there are more knockouts in heavyweight prize fights than there are in the other divisions, or there are in the welterweight division, for instance? Let's take a median division. I'm not sure. The only one I know, just off the top of my head, if you were to look at the history of the heavyweight championship, particularly when it was a universal undisputed thing, it almost always seemed to change hands by knockout or inside the distance. When if you were to look at the linear progress of the welterweight championship from the earliest days, Paddy Duffy being the first recognised champion way back when, then there would be knockouts, but not so routinely as in that heavyweight. Those transitions. So maybe that does not a statistical survey make, but it might suggest that it's true. But I've never been sure if it's entirely true, because you see murderers punching bantamweights like Carlos Zarate, who had 53 KOs out of 54 wins at one point, in the 80s. And you see guys like Zolano Tete score a 12 second knockout in the first round several years ago. So I've never been sure if it's true, but you certainly believe it is.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, it's correct. The biomechanics biomechanics of brain injury show it's correct. And there's little bits of research like that. It's 2016, PS 2016, I'm sure it's 26, PS 2016 with real boxers with instrumented gloves to show the force of impact, comparing that to the knockout rates. The heavier weights are the ones that get stopped and get knocked out compared to the lighter weights, despite being able to produce the same punch force of impact. So I believe that to be the case, and it's because of the bracing effect that a super heavyweight will tend to brace into the shot and have more mass behind it to do so. That increases contact time that all fighters need to transfer the energy to the brain, and that results in the knockout. And perhaps that's the reason why George Foreman is such a great knockout specialist, even though his punches are relatively slow. If you watch him fight, he has a big contact time. And indeed, Lunetsky is a researcher who carried out his PhD in respect to the kinematics of punching. And he recommends, he was on a podcast recently, and he says all heavyweight fighters, all fighters should follow the Foreman example and use the heavy bag to develop knockout power.
Yeah,
and it's about
because he would
getting
just
your
hit
weight
it
in
continuously. He just hit it at body level usually, and just keep throwing these broadsides at it, turning hooks in, one after the
Yeah.
other. Like, I mean, muscular endurance too, no doubt, but perhaps he's building up, like you say, he's building up knockout power.
Yeah, it's allowing it's getting you to actually hit and make contact and actually allow that force to actually transfer in. The longer the contact time, the more the force is transferred. It's from pulling back. There's research that shows that the way the muscles fire in boxing, there's two bits of tension. One on throwing the punch, and then you're near enough completely relax as the punch goes through the air, and then boom, you rigidize it. You get more tension again at the point of impact to stiffen the punch and allow longer contact time, allowing more force to be transferred over.
And that's what a guy, we will get back to him on Khalif, but that's what a guy like Prince Nassim Hamid would do. He would sometimes jump, and launch himself off the floor with these shots and stiffen his whole body on impact with them kind of unorthodox leaping shots and screw shots, etc. But it was as if he was trying to maximize the contact time, as you just suggested. So it is an interesting science, isn't it, punching power? Because there's some fighters just don't seem to have it, and other fighters have got it naturally. And
I never had it. When
me
Francois
either.
Botha switched to kickboxing, he fought the K1 circuit. He and I are both official K1 fighters, and we were in Stockholm. And he saw my fight, and his manager Steve Calicoda, my manager were friends. So we were all having dinner, having a chat. He says, "Gary, you've got to get more of your body weight behind your shots." Now, I was naturally 88 to 91 kilos. I'm 93 kilos now, but I used to fight super heavyweights. And I needed to be, I consider myself, I need to be over 100 kilos to actually sort of not be bounced around like a lunatic by their impacts. So I ate up for it. But he was picking up that I wasn't moving my body behind my shots and maximizing my effective mass. That's Francois Botha telling me that over dinner. So then I started to think I better learn a little bit more about how to get my weight behind the shots.
I was the same. I think personally, I was so focused on the sort of style and profile of it all, and the artistry. See, I'd say Sugar Ray Leonard and Muhammad Ali were kind of my kind of idols and guiding lights, but I actually think I misunderstood Sugar Ray Leonard to a degree because he was a banger. I mean, Ali was not exactly, you couldn't say he was a feather-fisted guy either, but he wasn't known first and foremost as a puncher. But
well, we can pull that back to Khalif on that. She's only got a 15% stoppage.
Sure. Well, that's the other thing I was going to say. But I think because I was so bedazzled with the kind of whole poetic grace of both of those fighters, I didn't really invest much sort of time in thinking about being a devastating puncher, which I do think makes a difference. Your mentality, your mindset, and what you're trying to replicate and what you're trying to achieve. But no, the thing about Khalif, yeah, exactly. She's not. That's what I'm saying, Gary. Looking at it, the plain evidence of your eyes tells you that she is well cast in world-class female amateur boxing context, having been beaten at a certain level in major tournaments up to her Olympic win when she got it all right, and I do wonder if that kind of shitstorm in the media propelled her towards it, even perhaps something without human affairs, when sometimes the zeitgeist starts pushing somebody in a certain direction towards their destiny, if you believe in that kind of thing, where the people who, because she was at the center of this big row and received an awful lot of vitriol and a lot of criticism and condemnation, sometimes that can propel you to your destiny and to the highest mountaintop with your performance, But I didn't see someone who had a ludicrous advantage over the other girls based on strength and everything else. So perhaps we could reach some conclusions. We both agree that it is not a cynical case of a known man entering as a woman because they got away with it, because it's a man who's not good enough to be
ever recorded of that taking place.
No, okay. So what you say, and you admit that you're not in position to make any conclusions at all, but you say she could be 5 alpha reductive. Is that did I get that
5
right?
alpha reductase deficient.
Reductase deficient, yeah.
Which is a difference in sexual development. Generally, it results in people being taller. Now, it's a male carrier type. It's got the Y on it, but you can actually have a complete female body with that. So how do you define what a female is? If it looks like a duck, swims like a duck, isn't it a duck? It's got a Y chromosome. It's got to be a man. That's a bit confusing. But also, so you can have that. There's also, so sex is split into a binary. We've got male and we've got female, but it's not a strict binary. There's a crossover. Interestingly, it's never stopped me in my career and not my personal life either, but I'm actually in the female range for testosterone. I've got female osteology in my hips. My hip bone structure is very feminine. It's quite wide, and it's caused me all kinds of issues at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now because I'm not actually flexible as a result of it because it doesn't quite mix together. In other words, there's a blend in between. And somewhere towards the center of that, still as part of normal human development, you've even had cases where you've got someone that's been producing female eggs and then later converted after puberty to converting male sperm and fathered a child. So when people say you can't change sex, and they define sex as whether they produce ovum or sperm, here you've got someone that's producing female eggs, viable female eggs, and then fathering a child with his sperm. It's incredibly complicated.
So
where do you draw the lines?
So what you appear to believe is that whatever the particular situation biologically with Khalif is, it's certainly not something. No intentional wrongdoing has occurred. And it's certainly not her fault. Whatever it is would be an accident at birth, and we don't know. We still don't know what it is. It might be nothing. By the way, she could be a completely normal woman, not 5-alpha reductate deficient.
We haven't even got qualification that she's got a Y carrier, a Y chromosome.
Because this was the very dodgy report, supposedly leaked medical records in the French magazine, wasn't it? Which has since been discredited because one of those endocrinologists has said he feels his name was being used to fuel some kind of agenda that he wasn't comfortable with, and he distanced himself from the comments.
He said one of them's actually said that the report did not exist.
Okay, so
one of the two named people said that report does not exist.
We don't even know there's an XY carrier type. All we know is that the IBA took the action they did last year before the World Championships, even though they allowed Khalif to progress to the final before they took that decision. We also know the IBA were stripped of their right to govern boxing in the Olympics because of their own failings, essentially, or in the eyes of the International Olympic Committee. We've seen that Khalif doesn't appear to have huge physical advantages over other world-class amateur females. We saw that happen, with the exception of the Italian who said she'd never been hit like that and she bailed after 46 seconds. But you could tell, if you know boxing, you could tell that girl wasn't particularly hurt and that she'd only taken one shot. That was ridiculous. I'm prepared to say that was ridiculous. And we know Khalif is on the verge of turning professional, supposedly, at least, reportedly. And we also know various people like... there's a guy called Andrew Gold who does a Heretics podcast, who's quite an interesting guy, and I like his show. But he says this is disgusting because he spoke to an expert in developmental biology called Emma Hilton. Does that name mean anything to you?
Yeah. So can I give you a quick bit of background on Emma Hilton?
Please, because I meant to bone up a little bit more before we spoke, because she's the one. It's Piers Morgan. Yeah, it's proven she was a man. It was Andrew Gold from Heretics saying, yeah, this is disgusting. We knew all along it was a man. And Emma Hilton is supposedly the expert that people like that are looking to prove that Khalif is a man. Yeah,
which is really worrying. Because again, it's on no actual evidence. Even today, we are, hypothetically speaking, Emma Hilton, to give you an idea, Emma Hilton is a developmental biologist. She's a biologist for sure. However, she's also a founder and director of an organization called Sex Matters, which I believe is a transphobic organization. They're gender criticals, and if you read their Twitter, it's all about transgender individuals.
Yeah.
Hilton, with another guy, Lundberg, wrote Hilton and Lundberg 2020, sorry, which was a review of whether transgender women should, transgender females should actually, transgender women should have participation in sport. And what she did, she looked at men and she looked at women, males, and she looked at females, and compared the two together. And basically was a wee bit disingenuous. She used a seated arm crank, for example. There's a study, Morris 2020, that says that men have 162%, which is 2.6 times the power in a punch than females. How did they study it? The seated crank. So they had an arm in a crank, arm strapped into a chair, sitting down, and they just turn a wheel. And that apparently was a punch.
Okay.
You and I both know that's not a punch.
Not how it works.
What about the legs? What about and in fact, that tension that's required would actually work against the power of a punch at impact. She was very disingenuous with what she presented, and she didn't study transgender athletes. She studied cisgender, so those assigned male at birth who remained male. And it's not the latest research position either. She presents what I say is a disingenuous perspective. For example, this 5-alpha reductase, some of them could at puberty turn into male characteristics. Others can have the complete female phenotype, internal and external. She will only portray one side of that and doesn't tell you about the other side. So yeah, I'm not a fan of Emma Hilton, I'm afraid.
So no, that's what I wanted to ask you about, because I suspect some people back off because they're kind of intimidated by the apparent academic kind of credentials or stature of a person like that. Because no doubt,
well, I'd like everyone to question. It's worth actually going to that podcast and having a look at what she says and question it and actually look at the findings of it. In fact, one of the things I do with my lectures and my workshops, I'll say again here, come at me from the biased position that everything I've said today is wrong and seek to prove me wrong with appropriate evidence, because data stands on its own.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. So check what I say. Try and prove me wrong. That'll do two things. One, it will allow you greater understanding of this very complex subject. As my professor says, it's complicated. But also, if I have made a mistake and you've got the right evidence to demonstrate that, let me know, because I'll change my opinion accordingly.
Yeah, because you can evolve your knowledge of said subject.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm not right.
And finally, if you can't prove it wrong, then that galvanizes what you said and it verifies what you said, because at least it was subjected to some opposite thinking.
Yeah, and do that with anyone that's stating on this. The amount of times I've said on X, on Twitter, what's the evidence to support that? My own eyes. That's generally what it comes down to. Yeah. Some people will say the IBA, but without following the IBA, they won't recognise the way that the IBA keeps on changing its stories, even in its own minutes.
I mean, people believe what they want to believe, don't they? It's like, as soon as this dodgy report came out last week, it was actually in a presidential debate that Piers Morgan was hosting with a few, Democrats and Republicans, and it was the day before the big, vote in America, and he was taking a right-wing type position, I suppose, against these kind of more left-wing people he had on the show. And he said, well, it's like with the Olympic show and that they make a leaf. It was proven yesterday that it's a man, that was very irresponsible, I think, for him to say that, because completely. But obviously people jumped on it. There was a bogus story doing the rounds, and how stupid people are. They'll share anything, that's written on the back of a milk bottle almost. And it said that the WBO had stripped Khalif of her gold medal. Now, the WBO have got fuck all to do with it, obviously, because they're the WBO. They're not the IOC. But people were believing that with nothing, with literally no source, and obviously the obvious absurdity of that narrative and that text from the outset. But because people believe what they want to believe, and particularly if you shouted yourself hoarse in the summer saying that's awful, that's a bully, that's a man, the world truly has gone mad, and this is the final nail in the coffin, and it's probably two-tier Kia's fault and Kamala Harris's fault because they all want us to be. They all want all our dads to be wearing dresses, and and don't get them started on the Muslims and the mosques, and all the rest of it. So people believe what they want to believe to a great extent, and it
Yeah.
suits their worldview to think that we've lost the plot, and they just long for the days when this country, this fictitious era they remember or don't even remember, but their grandma told them about, when this country had a bit of backbone, son. And that's what it comes down to. It's nothing more laudable than that half the time, is it?
Yeah, I agree. On that last bit, it's quite funny. Someone did that last week and put a couple of Spitfires up, saying we should go back in time to it's clock. Oh, when the clocks went back, the clock should go back to 1942 when we had a set of bollocks.
And I tell you what, they'd love it there, Gary. Put them there. Put their soft arse back in that time and see how they get along with it.
Yeah.
They'd soon be pressing the button that brought you back to 2024. I guarantee.
Oh, you know it. But this person, the funny part of this person was he's being racist about immigrants coming over. So I did point out that he was actually the Spitfires that he'd shown were actually the Polish squadron of Spitfires who flew for us. So thank you for reminding us that even back during World War II, we were multicultural and all working together.
Well, that reminds me of a Bernard Manning joke I saw one time. Don't ask me why, but I was watching reruns of Bernard Manning performances one night about several months ago. And he's at the Manchester Embassy Club, which was a staple place for him. He considers however successful he got on the television, he'd always do this kind of, I think he did this monthly thing at the Embassy Club in Manchester. And it was 1982 or 83 or thereabouts. And he said, I'd just like to say, by the way, just sitting over there are two young men who served at Goose Green. And everybody started clapping. He said, I just want to say on behalf of everybody, he touches his chest and goes, thank you. And they're all clapping, rousing ovation. And he goes, they're Argentinians, cheeky fuckers coming in here. But which is a similar thing, right?
yeah. It's people believe what they want to believe. As far I do view the world through rose-tinted glasses, but I'd like to believe that when Mark Adams says a statement for the IOC, there are 3 points to his statement. She was born female. 3 points. There's 4 points actually. She was born female. That we can agree on. She grew up as a female. Again, yes. we can carry that. She fought as a female, which is the third one. We can agree on those three. Then he comes out and says the scientific consensus is she is female. What else? And Khalifa herself says she's female. What else do we need? Why are we continually hounding a real individual with feelings?
I think it doesn't help that there's been such a lot of publicity recently about supposedly transgender. I don't know if it's the correct term to say transgender men in women's sports or transgender women in women's sports. I don't even know which way I'm supposed to phrase that. Women's
sports.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of concern about that, and yes, and it's very much so. Those are probably the two biggest issues in the Western world today. Certainly in England and America, I would say. Britain and America, the immigrants taking all our jobs, even though they're not even working, half of them, and the transgender taking over women's sports. They seem to be the most emotive issues right now, don't they?
Yeah.
Outside of blatantly economic issues.
So there's a website that does its best to find every single time a transgender woman has beaten a cisgender woman in a sporting event and actually won something, achieved a medal in something. They've come up with 380. Yeah. That's 380 all time, all ages, all countries, all levels. And when you look at it, one of them won the show Jeopardy.
Okay.
One, and I think there's 3 or 4 in there actually won eating competitions.
Well, men traditionally eat more than women, don't they? But that's very much a gender issue, isn't it? I mean, you see, it's even
it shows that it's not really a problem.
at finishing schools, I believe sometimes young ladies were advised not to finish all their dinner, even if they wanted it in polite society, because it was more ladylike to leave some. And I must admit, traditionally in relationships, I've always gotten used to the idea that she's not going to finish hers and I'm going to get that in a minute. You know, when you're eating, you both go to a cafe or you go to a pub or whatever you do, a restaurant, and you
Yeah.
order whatever, and you've got, and then I plead guilty. I sometimes will be eyeing up hers midway through it when I'm getting near the end of mine because I can eat pretty quickly as well, which is, I know it's not another social faux pas. And you start looking, thinking she's never going to finish all those chips, or she's never going, she won't want all, she doesn't even want that burger. You know what I mean? So traditionally speaking, men seem to have bigger appetites, supposedly, or you get the older type of woman who says, "I like a man who likes his food. I like a man who can eat," and so
Yeah.
perhaps there's something in that. I don't know.
Yeah. But
As for
on
winning
that transgender
Jeopardy,
side as well, transgender. So with World Rugby, for example, when they were doing their making their decision and finding their research in it, which they heavily relied on Emma Hilton and Lundberg's work,
yeah,
and which has been, again, it's been surpassed now and overturned by the latest research and latest review papers that say something completely different. Basically, they compared the mass and power of males against females, and they compared males against females, not transgender males against females. So the males had 140% the weight of the females,
yeah,
but they didn't take into account that the average transgender is only 102% the weight of females,
okay.
well
So
within that variation. So what they then did was, on the premise of there's an injury risk, in the face of no injury data from the transgender players already playing, literally none from transgender individuals, they discriminated against transgender because of the injury risk, because they might be bigger than the females.
interesting.
They
I
didn't get rid
also
of the bigger people who were playing, but they got rid of the transgender who actually were the same size.
I'm also glad to get the little comment there as well from David Evans, who's a British Boxing Board of Control whip, who's just said fascinating chat, because we were going for quite a long time and no one was saying anything, and I think it's just a lot of people
They're still
have just been
there.
watching with interest and just taking it all in. But
Well, on that
so
chat side, someone asked about what about the Kiwi lifter?
yes, do you want to
Which we
have a
know
look at that?
hard.
Do you want to take that? Was Kung
Oh, here we
Cow?
go. So yeah, hi. That Kiwi weightlifter. Now she did achieve the Olympics. One of the only, I think there's only been three transgender women who've actually made the Olympics. She came last and was 50 kilos off the world record. Now, yes, she made the Olympics, but interesting. I was watching that with friends. I was watching it with interest because of my personal interest, and she came out, and one of the mates went, "Oh my god, that really is a bloke." And she did her bits. And then I think, let's just say another country came out, went, "Oh my God, is that transgender too?" And she
Yeah.
looked more like a bloke than Laurel and dwarf Laurel. And then the next one came out and goes, "Oh my God, this one's even worse. Is that the transgender one?" And it was so it so highlighted the fact that people have this impression of what a man should be, this impression of what a woman should be, and don't
Yeah,
realize the human variation between is massive.
sure. And Tony, pugilistic boy, Tony Cox, when he's at work, says, "I count out a greater wisdom, and this conversation is gold." I mean, I appreciate that too, because I wasn't. I got this idea to do this with you, Gary, because I posted the other day about the fact that
Yeah,
the issue had reared its head again, and then you were commenting and picking someone up on some ignorance of something or other, and I thought that's what I'll do. I'll get Gary on the show to talk about this, because I wouldn't still be talking about this if it hadn't resurfaced last week, by the way, because I figured it was kind of put to bed, at least until she
yeah,
does turn pro. It was put to bed last summer, but it did. It was kind of Piers Morgan that annoyed me, to be honest. I don't dislike Piers Morgan. He's good at what he does. He has a very successful show. and more power to him. I don't. I enjoy watching his show. To be honest with you, I watch it quite a lot in the morning when I'm just thinking about getting out of the house. But it did annoy me when he said it was proven she was a man, because he didn't really know what he was talking about.
It's a falsehood. Yeah.
I mean,
Not
I
only that,
will
I
say
think the
that.
one thing with all of this is that no matter what anyone's opinion, they should still remind themselves to actually be polite.
So
You can
we should
express
think,
opinion in
Gary.
a polite way.
Yeah, Tony says, by the way, I was at the Olympic final with Khalif, and I've argued that the narrative is awful. We should have a think, Gary, because I suppose this inevitably would seem like we're coming from the belief system that she is a female and leave her alone. Okay, so let's play devil's advocate. Could we possibly get ourselves to perhaps see it another way, even in
Mhm.
theory? What is the Because it's very difficult to shake the idea she was born female, raised female, and has boxed female all the time, and has won some and lost some, and not scored plenty of KOs in that. So she doesn't seem out of place. The other thing is, some people say, "Oh, maybe it's a man who's just that bad that he can only be competitive with women." Well, it doesn't. That doesn't stack up, because you look at the bouts and the skills, and she's she's about there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what position could we take, in theory, if we were trying to see it the other way? That I suppose that there is a genetic disorder, of the types which you have more information about, more knowledge of than I do, and that could be seen or construed as unfair, even though it's nobody's fault. It could be seen as unacceptable,
Yeah,
and
although
hence,
as I
and hence
quoted
there
for the
need to be some new
research,
laws around this. Yeah, is that the
as
best we
as I
can do?
quoted for the research, though, there is no advantage to those conditions.
No,
Um,
so that's the best we can do. Really bending over backwards to try and see it the other way, and even then you've shot it down on a reasonable basis, right?
yeah, yeah, it's
We tried.
it's difficult. So say for example, it comes out completely that she's a complete and utter male in every respect, and we've all been hoodwinked. She
Yeah.
still didn't appear to have a competitive advantage on the way through.
But Paul Malignaggi said it too, Gary. He said, all of you, he was very vitriolic last week. He said, all of you scumbags who defended this, hang your heads in shame. All you motherfuckers. And, he was really went to town on it. That's, once again, that's belief system stuff. You want to
It's
believe that the world is crazy today because this really sinister liberal left Nazi militia is in charge, and they want to destroy society and its very fabric as we know it. That's
I
what
say it's
people want to
toxic
believe.
ideology.
Toxic
So
ideology,
ideology
good
is a
term.
belief system. You've got one, I've got one, we've all got one. We're talking about our ideology today on the topic that we're talking about.
Yeah,
We cannot not, because we have a belief system and we give an opinion. Okay, I'm doing my best to back my opinion with the data, but it's an opinion, it's an ideology. It's when it gets toxic and it's based on no evidence. That's when I really hate it, because there's just no need for it. When the world's in a crap enough place as it is, why
yeah.
add to it?
These are very strange times and very divisive times, and I think I've never felt a time in my life when I've felt more alienated by both sides of an argument, often that persists in popular culture or online or
Mm.
wherever you see it. Particularly this struggle supposedly between the left and the right, and the notion that there's now a big far right faction, and they said we're not far right, we're just concerned patriots. And then you get it used to be cool at college to be left wing, right? To be a socialist and to be enlightened and a little bit
Well, we
kind of,
all remember Ben Elton.
yeah, do you know what I mean? A little bit libertarian. Whereas now it seems to be an absolute cancer to be left wing, according to a lot of people. And then at the other side, you've got this idea that people who are a little bit more right wing are suddenly construed as Nazis and racists and
Yeah.
fascists. I just think it's a very polarizing, confusing time to be alive in, to be honest with you.
Yeah, maybe Dalton in Roadhouse had it right with "be nice" until it's time not to be nice.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just be nice about it. You can put your opinion out there and still be polite about it.
Yeah, you can.
It's like
I'm still
the
learning. I
football
mean,
terraces sometimes. Spurs.
ironically,
Yeah, it's
Ironically, we started talking, you and me. Our first interaction was you'd said something which I'd seen as not just controversial but implausible, and I was pretty dismissive in a way that could almost been construed as I remember saying, "Oh yeah, obviously an idiotic thing to say or something like that. And because you weren't offended and didn't take the bait, you sort of hung in there and stayed polite. And I thought, actually, this guy is pretty bright and he's probably worth knowing and talking to. So we
Oh,
persisted from
thanks.
there.
I'm,
Because I
I'm
do
so
remember
pleased that
telling
we
you
did
you were
because I
talking
learn so much
nonsense.
from you all the time.
Yeah, I remember telling you were talking nonsense about something, and what it was, I do remember. You were saying, and it was God. It was maybe it was about 2016 or 17. You were saying that if you guys, not just you, but a certain team that you had was to train Frank Bruno and not allow him to be indoctrinated with the belief that age would prevent him from doing it. You said he could be as good as he used to be if he were only to accept certain things and have the right coaching. And I said,
Yeah,
don't be
yeah, with the
ridiculous at the
age,
time.
yeah, yeah. And in
Yeah,
fact, the physical, yeah, it was the physical deficits that drop off can be outweighed by the experience that he's got.
yeah,
Especially because we do, boxing is, I'm not saying we, but I wasn't allowed to box because of my eyes, too short sighted, hence why I went kickboxing route. Um,
yeah.
but I did used to be a sparring partner in the British Army boxing team, and that was fun because every time I boxed them, I got killed. They hammered me, they racked out the points. I had to use some sneakiness from kickboxing, different moves I hadn't seen to actually stay alive with them. There's some skilled boxers, some great Tuesday afternoons there. But we do an interactive and interceptive sport, and it's all down to skill primarily. It doesn't matter how, this is why bodybuilders and powerlifters, all of strength and power, they're useless when they get in the ring because they can't
Yeah,
apply it with the skill of boxing, the sweet art of boxing.
yeah,
So the longer you are in it, the more data that you've got. And as long as the brain hasn't received the excessive trauma, the body should be able to apply it. It was a great discussion we had. I like that. I've kind of changed my view a little bit with what I know about the brain now.
well, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's about knowledge. I mean, I'd hope I'm wiser and more knowledgeable about certain things than I was then as well, because I do believe it was about 7 years ago. And that's the thing, in it. We don't have to stay firmly entrenched and get stuck in our opinions on
No, no.
things. As long as we can have dialogue, and it's been a wonderful one tonight, Gary. And I'm glad that it was well received by the little audience that tuned in tonight, because it's very sugar silk and stretch, really. We are making some changes to the channel, which I'll
Yeah.
open up to the fans and followers of the show more shortly. But this was pretty unsugar silk and stretch, but I think people appreciate it. And I actually like a break from the kind of chaos of arguing with Michael and Gary all the time, and Michael always interrupting me and etc. etc. So this has been a pleasure from my angle, and I thank you for coming on.
No, thank you very much for me coming on. And just raising what is an interest topic of mine, full stop. But also giving an audience where we can get the message of, hold on, whatever your opinion, let's just be polite about this. There's no need to be dicks about it. That'd be my conclusion on the whole topic.
Amen. And what I used to do, because we use StreamYard technology for these live streams. Usually I could press the button and say goodbye to the viewers, and then I could still talk to you backstage and say thanks a lot, mate. See you soon, and how's your golf game going and all the rest of it. But I can't do that now because every time I press the end, that's just gone. So I'm going to say now, thanks so much, Gary. We can talk anytime via Facebook inbox anyway. Great show. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Sugar Silk and Stretch will be back. Plenty of content. I'm going to all the press conferences, as you know now, and getting the content that I can get. Started to open things up a bit. We did Trisha Morrison last night at the later time of 10:15. Never done a show on a Monday night before, so we got Gary Turner on tonight. I'm just going to utilize this platform. Michael Elijah is busy right now. Gary Stretch has got certain things going on, so stick with me and you won't go wrong. Be lucky. Keep punching. Peace.